Hey, all years ago, I made a video series course that never actually happened for songwriters about basic music composition techniques. And I thought that I would start posting some of these videos. They're not all useful for the channel, but I figured that it might be good to, in the interest of keeping up with my YouTube longs schedule, just start posting some of these backlogged videos that I'm finding that I made years ago that I just never posted. And so this one is about motivic development in Studio One. Now, Studio One, I don't use Studio One as much anymore, and the version that I'm using in this video is, I think, Studio One Professional version 5. Now, as of this recording, we're on version 7, so it's gotten a lot better. It's still a great digital audio workstation. There's several reasons I just have moved away from it, but I do think that it is useful to look at, particularly the PowerPoint that I share at the beginning. But then if you're a Studio One user and you're interested in this idea of motivic development, you might be interested in, seeing some of the macros that I show and, some of the ways that Studio One makes this process really easy. So anyway, again, I'm going to keep posting some of these videos as we go. I might post a new YouTube long next week, and then the week after post another one of these backlogged videos, or I might just keep up with the backlogged videos for a little while until we've posted all the ones that I've found that seem to be useful. So anyway, I hope you enjoy. Hey everyone, Chris here. This is our big video on motives and development of motives. So I wanted to start by doing a short PowerPoint presentation on how to, what a motive is and some of the ways we can develop the motive. A motive seems like kind of a strange word. But actually, let's just jump in right here. I've got this first slide. It'll kind of tell us what a motive is. So what I've got written here is that a motive is a short 3 to 6 note melodic idea that has at least some rhythmic or intervallic interest. In other words, intervals, right? The distance between the notes vertically. So, rhythm and intervals together can give that motive its flair. It's, we recognize it in a lot of ways because of the rhythm and the intervals contained in the motive. So again, it's a short melodic idea. It's not a long melody. It's very short. And I wanted to note here as well that some use the term motif and motive interchangeably. That's totally fine. You might hear somebody say motif. That's fine. I've just always said motive because that's just the way I was taught. So let's go on here and take a look at the first just few measures here of the first movement of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. It's probably the most recognizable motive in the entire classical repertoire. So this motive, right? This motive is very, very recognizable. And if you think about it, the entire piece, the entire movement of that symphony, that first movement, is based on that one motive. If you listen for it, the entire piece, just everything is built on that. There is nothing that isn't taken from that motive. So I have here the traditional notation, and I want to show you the DAW MIDI piano roll editor in Logic Pro. I have a screenshot of that same motive, the same opening 5 measures of the motive here in the MIDI editor. So again, this is something that looks familiar to us as we've been looking at some of this stuff before. You've got the bars, and those bars length in time according to the grid at the top. You've got the measure numbers at the top. Those length of the length of the bars within those measures give us kind of an idea of the rhythm of the piece. But anyway, so let's keep going here. The first 2 measures, as I mentioned before, that is the actual motive. And so you'll just want to keep that in mind. The second 2 or 3 measures is actually another iteration of the motive. It has the same basic rhythmic value and shape as the opening motive, but it's just down Um, it's played down a whole step. So a whole step, 2 half steps is played down just a little bit in pitch from the original. So something else to keep in mind is that eighth note rest at the beginning of each motive is actually a part of the motive. The motive contains not only pitches, but it also contains silence, right? That's actually, just incidentally, this is my original music theory professor. His definition of music, actually, just for a little extra piece of info here, his definition of music is that music is a manipulation of sounds and silence into forms that carry culturally derived meaning. So next, let's take a look at some ways you can actually develop your motives. I have here 5 ways. There are other ways. We might talk a little bit about those as we go, but these are kind of the 5 main ways that most composition students will be taught, at least to kind of just develop these melodic ideas when they're starting off in school, I guess in sophomore year composition lessons. So the first is retrograde. Now, as the name might imply, you literally just reverse the order of the notes. So I have here an original and it's retrograde. Now, you'll notice too that not only have the pitches been reversed, but the actual rhythms have been turned around as well. You could just reverse the pitches, in other words, the actual notes themselves, and leave the rhythms of the original intact. So, in other words, I've got my mouse here. Let me just show you. You see that we have this long, this is what we call a dotted quarter note because it goes all the way from the first quarter note to the second half of the second quarter note beat in that measure. So it's a dotted quarter note. It goes up here to a 16th and then to another 16th right on the third beat. And then there's a gap from that third beat all the way to the fourth beat. In the retrograde, we have kind of this weird, it's not even really a dotted half. It's like it's the same length as this note here. This note actually goes, I think, out above, beyond the measure where I have it, where I have the screenshot cut off. But anyway, it kind of goes a little bit longer. And then there's that same gap here as there is right here, right? That little, that gap in terms of time. And then this same gap here as there is right here. So you see it's an exact mirror of the original. But you could literally just take the notes of this particular idea and put the D4 here and just kind of reverse it pitch-wise without doing the rhythms. So I just wanted to point that out. I'll show you how to do the retrograde the way that we have it here. But if you did just want to swap the notes around, leave the rhythm the way that it is, you'd be fine doing that as well. Let's keep going. Okay, yeah, this is just a little note about the fact that the rhythms are exactly the same. Or sorry, that they are an exact mirror or reverse order. So here's an example where we do the original and we just keep the rhythms intact. So again, this is exactly what I just explained. So you've got the actual rhythms exactly in this particular example as they are in the original. It's just that the pitches have been reversed. So good to know. Inversion. Now this one's a little bit different. It'll take some explaining. So what you do with an inversion is you take the same starting pitch as in the original motive, but rather than moving in the same direction, up or down, as you move through the pitches, you will mirror the intervals in the opposite direction. And I mean mirror it vertically, right? You'll move horizontally to get whichever pitches are in the motive and kind of move up and down in the opposite direction with the inversion. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, so first step, the inversion has the same starting pitch at least in this example. You could invert it from the center pitch. You could do all kinds of things. But for the purposes of what we're doing here, let me just show you the way that that I was taught, the way that I did it a lot in composition lessons. So again, the same first starting pitch. That's step one. Step two, the original moves up 4 half steps between the first and second note. So that's a major third up. And the inversion, on the other hand, again, same first starting note, instead of moving up 4 half steps, it moves down 4 half steps. So again, we move through the motive like this, but whatever the original does, the inversion does the opposite. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's keep going. Next step, original moves up 3 half steps from that second pitch to the third one. So in the inversion, we're going to move down 3 half steps between the second and third notes. In other words, we're going to go a minor third up in the original, so that means the inversion needs to go a minor third down. All right, let's keep going. Same exact thing for this last step. Now, you'll have as many steps in this particular process as you do pitches in your motive. So you might have 6 pitches, so that means you'd have, I guess 5 steps in that particular instance. Because you have basically just the, how do the notes move from one to the other, not necessarily the same exact number of pitches for steps, or steps for pitches. So, okay, so in this particular last little step here, the original from the third note to the fourth note moves up a minor third. So 3 half steps between the fourth and third note, and then the inversion, because we're just going to do the opposite, moves down by a minor third, or 3 half steps between the third and fourth note. So that is basically inversion. So you have the, it just looks like a mirror of the original, but you're doing it basically like horizontally. So you're moving horizontally through the pitches, but the pitches themselves are either moving up or down depending on what the original does. You're just doing the opposite. So that's basically it. Retrograde inversion. This is a combination of the first 2 methods. So first you retrograde the motive, and then you invert the retrograde. So let's take a look at what we mean here, right? So here's the original, right? Now we won't go through all the steps that we did before, because that's, basically what we just did. Just go through the steps as before, retrograde the thing first, so reverse all the pitches, and then invert it. So again, here's the original on the left and the retrograde inversion. By the way, I will show you how to do all of this in Studio One in just a little bit. I wanted to just start with the PowerPoint though, so we kind of know what we're trying to do before we jump into the software and try to start actually creating these things. So, and then the last 2 are fairly simple to explain. Augmentation, you just increase the rhythmic value of the notes in the motive. Make them longer. Now, you could literally just make them longer and leave the starting points of the notes in the same place, so they would just overlap a bunch, depending on how much you augment the notes. But what I've done here, or what I will show you I've done, is that I've exactly doubled, in this example, the pitches rhythmic value in time, but also their starting points. So basically, I just took the little motive, the measure that had the motive in it that I had before, and I multiplied it by 2, so that everything is exactly proportionally the same, just doubled. So it's longer. So the other one, the last thing, is diminution, which is to decrease the rhythmic value of the notes in the motive. So that just means, make them shorter. Now again, in this example, I have done it proportionally. So I just literally took the notes and I halved them, so that, as you can see here, the measure at the top, if you look at the, look at the notes at the top, you'll see that the measure where we have notes has been exactly halved. I guess the measure is still there technically. The measurement at the top tells us the measure, but the region in Studio One here that contains the notes that we're dealing with, that's the part that has been halved. And I'll show you why I did that in a minute, because we want to, again, I'll show you how Studio One does this kind of stuff. It's pretty handy how quickly and easily you can do this in Studio One. So if you've got a melodic or rhythmic idea, you could just easily perform these tasks on your material to try and come up with new material rather quickly. So fairly, it's a very cool process. So I have one final thought here. Think of these as a starting point. You may, as I say here, you may end up cutting notes or using elements of each of the methods to find new ideas based on your original. So the most important thing, though, is to keep an open mind and experiment. Some composers will add notes to their motives in some places. They will take them away. They will, as I said, they'll combine different methods. What you come up with may not sound great. The point is that you experiment. I've had a lot of motivic ideas that I run through the paces in these little exercises, and I have a bunch that just sound awful. But the point is, again, just to experiment and just keep an open mind, explore. Think of it as an exploratory exercise through the musical material that you have for your song or for whatever piece of music you're writing. So with that, we will now jump into Studio One, and I will show you how to do each of these tasks that we have talked about here in the PowerPoint. So see you over there. Hey everyone, here we are in our Studio One project as promised, and I have the motive that we've been looking at in the PowerPoint pulled up here. I just have it on track 1. It's a MIDI track or an instrument track where I have some MIDI data inserted here. So this is the motive down here. All I did was I double-clicked this MIDI region. As you can see, it's 1 measure long. Double-click, open it up, and I just played this in. By the way, if you play in something to your track and it's not quite on time exactly like where it needs to be rhythmically, you can select all of the notes and then hit the letter Q on your keyboard. Or I think you can press this button right here. Yeah, Q. Quantize is going to it's going to force the notes to snap to the nearest beat or sub beat or whatever, depending on what you have selected over here. So right here, I've got a fairly small quantize resolution. That's the word. So in other words, my grid is set up a certain way, and when I hit quantize, this is telling Studio One that I want the notes, when I quantize my notes, to look for the nearest 16th note and to snap to that. Now I've already quantized this, but if I played this directly in, the notes might be, come on, let's make sure this is selected. The notes might be over a little bit. Now that's actually it's gonna move by 16th notes, but it might be starting like right here or something like that. So if you played something in and you want to use that as your motive, but it's not quite playing with the metronome, then you may want to select all the notes. You can either drag and click and drag, or you can hit Command A on a Mac or Control A on a PC, and then hit the letter Q or this letter Q up here, and it will quantize the notes for you. So that's a little side note, but anyway, so mine is perfectly quantized. Let's listen to it really fast. So I've got it looped up here, by the way, which it's just going to play over and over again. Okay, so now that that's in our ears a little bit, let's actually start from the end of our last PowerPoint and kind of go through each method. Now, we can start with diminution because that's the one that we ended with. We might as well start there. Now, this one's really easy to do in Studio One. Now, remember, diminution is where we change the values of the notes by shortening them, right? You can augment them, or you can
perform a diminution on it, which means to shorten the notes. Now, what I did, I mean, you could literally just shorten the notes where they sit right there, but that wouldn't really be diminution because they wouldn't be also changing proportionally. So the easiest way to do this, I mean, this is going to seem so silly easy, but if I hold down Alt on my computer keyboard, now again, I'm on a Mac. I believe it will work on a PC as well, but I'm holding down Alt. You see, I've got my mouse over here right on the edge of this MIDI region. Hold down Alt, and look at that. We have a little clock. So if I click and drag to compress, oh, hang on, it messed up. Click and drag to compress, what it's doing is it's proportionally changing the values of the notes, like the length of the notes, and where they fall in time to be the same as they were originally, but in this case, I dragged it to be half the length. So if you look down here, the notes are still exactly where they would have been if they were out here a measure long, but now we've forced the notes into half a measure. So if we listen to this again, we actually click this, and we're going to set our, oh gosh, I can't remember how to do this. There we go. Set my loop points. I just literally clicked out of here and then clicked back on this, and it automatically set the loop points. Now let me go back to the beginning. You hear that? So this might be a good way if you wanted to create a little pattern in the bass, or just a pattern, well, you could create a pattern anywhere in your music. Like if you want to just base your a pattern on this little idea, that might be a cool way to do it. Now, augmentation, on the other hand, you go the opposite direction. We want to expand the notes, make them longer, but we're going to do it proportionally. So as you might guess, same thing as before, hold down Alt right here, click, drag. Now this time we're going to make them twice as long as the original. So we're going out to 3 measures. Originally we were at, well, we had 2 measures. Or sorry, 1 measure from 1 to 2. Now we're going from 1 to 3. So now we have 3 measures. And if I go to the beginning and play this, you'll hear it's the same thing, just twice as long. And my guitar track is starting to play down here. I'll move him over a little bit. There we go. Okay, anyway, can't avoid the guitar track. But you see what I mean. It's fairly easy to do this. Now I'm going to change it back to its original length really quick, because we're going to perform our other actions on this little guy. Okay, now we're going to hop around a little bit. I'm going to go back to retrograde. Now, retrograde is fairly easy to do as well. Now, look what I have here. You may not have this activated, but here, you see this funny little icon right here? It says macros. If we click that, it's going to give us this little macros toolbar. Now, macros are a cool feature in Studio One where if you tend to find yourself doing multiple clicks to perform an action that you do over and over again, you might consider making a macro out of it. So what they've done is they've actually got some MIDI macros that you can use to perform quick tasks on your notes. So let's talk about retrograde. Again, retrograde is just reversing the order of the notes, playing them backward. Now, if I select all my notes and click mirror, and it says here it's going to mirror them horizontally, and it just says, if you roll your mouse over it, you'll see it says reverse notes. Also, by the way, I have music creation selected. If you change this, then your macros bar is going to change. So you want to make sure that you're on music creation. And with my notes selected, I click mirror, and it literally reverses them. And it makes an exact mirror reversal. So if we actually, let me do this. I'm going to actually take, really quickly, I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to hit just the letter D. Okay, so see this? I've got an exact duplicate. I have an exact duplicate down here, right? Here's what I want to do. I want to make this the original, because we'll leave it like it is, and I want this to be the retrograde. Now, let's just do this really quick. We're going to we just have this region selected. It's highlighted down here. We hit mirror. Okay. So we can actually go up here, and I'm going to select these two, and I'm going to go to the beginning. Now that sounds a little funky, right? You might want it to be exactly the rhythmic, you might want the rhythms of this to be the same as they are over here. So what we could do is we could just make the rhythms the same. As you see here, this note on this, oh, cut it in half accidentally. This note here is a dotted quarter. And, you know, we haven't really talked about dotted quarters, but basically a quarter note is, as you know from the Essentials of Music PowerPoint, a quarter note is basically if you have a measure of 4 beats and you're in a 4/4 time, which you see we are right here, that means we have 4 beats in each measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. So in other words, this quarter note is 1 beat, 1 exact quarter of our entire measure. So a dotted quarter is actually a quarter and a half. So you can see it too. It goes out to the second quarter note, and then it goes out halfway in there. So what we need to make this an exact equivalent of our original is we need to make this into a dotted quarter. So we're just going to drag this guy out. And now we know that this note happens right there, that 16th note right there. So we can move this over. Okay. And then we have 2/16 before the next note. So let's move this one over 1. So we've got 1, 2/16. And then after that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 before we get to that last note. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4. So we need E3 to go all the way over here. Now it should be a retrograde, but rhythmically the same as the original. So let's check this out. Go back to the beginning. That's kind of neat, right? Now you could change this to be, you could change the notes a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting. So here's what we're moving toward, right? We're actually moving toward making, and I'm going to mute these other tracks because I think we're going to bleed out into the other areas here. What we're moving toward here is we're moving toward creating 4-bar phrases and what we call 8-bar periods. And you can create a 4-bar phrase using motives in this way. Now, my motive here happens to be 1 measure long, but you could have a motive that's shorter and still write a 4-bar phrase with it, or a musical phrase with it. So what I'm trying to move in the direction of here is creating, you know, original motive, a variation on that motive, another variation on that motive, and then a final variation on that motive to create my 4-bar phrase. So I just wanted to kind of start building this out a little bit to kind of show you the direction where we're headed. Okay, so let's actually leave our original like it is so we can still see it. I'm going to actually make this, we'll make this the original as well. I'm going to hit Control D again so we have 2 exact copies. Now what if we want to make this the inversion of the original? And I like having it out here on the left so we can kind of see what the original looks like and compare it against the original. So we're going to make an inversion over here. So what do we need to do? So I think you can do it by manipulating these up here, but I'm going to ignore the macros for just a second. And I'm just going to right click after I've selected all my notes. I'm going to right click. I'm going to hit mirror notes. Okay. And it gives me this little dialogue. Now, I want to mirror on the first note, is what I put in the PowerPoint earlier. This is how we taught the retrograde, or sorry, the inversion. So we want to mirror notes horizontally. So as we did in the PowerPoint, we start on the first note, we move horizontally, and we decide to go up or down based on the original. So I think this should be correct. Mirror on the first note, mirror horizontally. We're going to click OK. All right. I think that's right. So let's check this out. We went on the original. We have E3 going up 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. And down here, we have E3 going down 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. So that's correct. Between the second and third notes, we have up 1, 2, 3 half steps to the second note. And we've got down here, moving down 1, 2, 3 half steps to the next note. Should be correct. And then finally, we have moves up 1, 2, 3 half steps, and down here we have moves down 1, 2, 3 half steps. So this is correct. Now it's not going to sound right because it's not going to sound very good because this note right here leaps way down to the first note. And this is a thing about writing melodies that you should know. Our ears like to have lead up to notes. We don't tend to like a lot of leaps in our melodies. It just sounds weird, you know? So you want to make sure that for the most part, your melody has some good stepwise motion. In other words, stepwise meaning half steps, whole steps, or if you do leap, you want to fill in the leap later. So in other words, maybe you leap really far, but you want to, like if, let's say this was the leap, this would be really a long leap. And let me just show you what this sounds like. Go back to the beginning. Oh wait, hold on, I gotta select both. There we go. Play. Okay. Now, and the notes down here don't even sound like they're in the right key. That's okay. The point of this is to kind of get you thinking about, okay, if I'm stuck and I need to write a melody, pardon me, how do I go from the little germ of an idea that I have to something bigger? Well, these are some good starting points. But to glue it together and make it sound cohesive, you are going to need to think about this like stepwise motion thing. So again, back to what I said a second ago, if I leap from this note to this note, I need to later fill it in when I write the rest of my melody. It could be over the course of several bars, but we want to make sure that this gap here is somewhat filled in later. And hopefully by mostly stepwise motion. Okay, again, half steps and whole steps. Now to make this sound, right, you might actually consider moving these up. I can take my arrows here and just move it up. So again, I still have an inversion of the original, but now I'm trying to make it sound like it fits in this little area. And again, as I said, these are a starting point. So you could add notes, you could do all kinds of stuff to kind of make this sound the way you need it to sound. But let's do something really quick. Let's actually take a step further. I think we talked about retrograde. We need to talk about retrograde inversion. So we talked about inversion, we've talked about retrograde. Retrograde inversion is basically the same exact thing. It's exactly what it sounds like. You take the retrograde of the original and then you invert it. So let's do that to this one. All right, so we have the original. I just did a bunch of undos. So now we have the original here. We're going to retrograde it this way by turning it around. Okay. Now I'm just going to leave the rhythmic mirroring there. I know that we moved it over and kind of changed it to make it sound rhythmically the same as this over here. That's fine. Let's just leave this as it is. And then we're going to invert this retrograde. Again, we've got the notes selected still. We've already done our retrograde. Right click, mirror notes horizontally, mirror on first note. And by the way, you can do whatever you want in here. I mean, it's still going to be sort of an inversion of a sort. So you could play around with mirroring on the middle note or mirroring on a custom note and just change whatever note you want to change here to make the mirroring start there and have that be the pivot point that you use to mirror your notes. But anyway, we're just going to do this like I taught in the PowerPoint for the sake of explanation. So I'm going to hit OK. All right, so it moved everything down here. Now, the funny thing is that it basically inverted. Now, hang on here. Let me just make sure that we got this right. So we got the retrograde, which we did, and then the inversion. Let's see here. Let me do the steps again. Make sure we got this right. So we retrograde, and then we invert the retrograde. Yep. There it is. So it has the same shape, basically, as the original. Now, it's going to sound like I could put it back on the same note. It basically sound roughly the same. It's just that the rhythms are going to be kind of funky. So let's do this. Let's go back to the beginning and play it. So you can see these intervals over here changed, and the rhythm is obviously different. So, you know, this one may not be as useful unless you're maybe you're a little further away from the original and you want to make something that is a little different. But anyway, so as I said in the PowerPoint, please think of these as a starting point. There's also adding notes. As I said before, sometimes composers will truncate or cut off their motive like right in the middle and just kind of put the first two notes or something. They might, you know, chop it up or whatever. So again, don't think of these as, you know, when I'm building my melody, I've got to have, well, you know, one of each of these or whatever. The key is to make it sound cohesive. And the key to making it sound cohesive, as I said before, is making the melody more stepwise rather than leaping all over the place, because that's just the way, that's how it's going to sound the best. So I hope this is helpful, and we will see you in the next video.